It looks, oh, okay, thank you. It said I've got a green screen share, so let's see what happens when I use that button. I'm going to start with the presentation part and click share and see what that does for us and kick this off from the beginning. So thank you all for such a phenomenal response and all of the level of detail. So many of you gave so much extra information that's really vital to making a good survey and giving you back good data. So thank you for the time spent getting that data to us. All of the data is just as a reminder of April 30th when we needed the data back, which is still current for this fiscal year and should allow you some time to do like one-off market adjustments or whatever you need to do, ranks, create ranges, make adoptions to your compensation and classification plans going forward for the next fiscal year. I want to start off with benefits. They're not as sexy and exciting as the salary data we're all anxious to hear, but benefits data is really important because it really is still in the top 10 and still in a lot of it's in the top 5 for what employees are looking for from their employer. So oh, and I did see this. Thank you, Shannon, for compiling all the data. Lots of kudos went to me, but this is like candy to me. I'm like a kid in a toy store with data and spreadsheets, but Shannon did a lot of hard work and she compiled all of the benefits data you're going to be seeing and receiving. So thank you, Shannon, because I know how much work goes into that. I wanted to start with something that's really important and give us a snapshot of turnover because we've all heard about the Great Resignation where employees are looking, they're ready to jump ship if they find an opportunity. Some are being more active in their career opportunities, seeking what's out there in their careers and what opportunities are available. So I wanted to start with just a snapshot that we had captured regarding turnover. And you can see it is creeping up in some are faring better than others. So you'll want to take a look at what you returned for data and see if it's anything you can manage that is, while it's all voluntary in most likely, I would think, mostly voluntary. I can't remember offhand, but it's still, is it things you can manage like more flexibility or better pay or things like that, things you want to factor in to either your benefit selections or as you move forward with looking at your salaries and your compensation structure. These are just some quick snapshots. I'm not going to dive into them, but these are categories that still rank at the top of what employees are looking for. And you hear a lot about the work-life balance that we're all looking for. Employees, one of the things that still shake out at the top is paid time off, paid leave. So we captured in the survey data, you know, the different types of leave that you can offer to your employees that really are in a way no cost to you because you've already budgeted their salary. They're just substituting leave for the salary you've already budgeted. So that's a good way to be generous in, you know, leave time or sick leave, other types of leave, floating holidays, paid holidays, those kinds of things. So that's one easy thing to take a look at and make sure that you promote to candidates as well as your employees. And it's an easy way to be generous. I think, because you've already budgeted, again, the salary and they're just swapping out a paid leave status. And if the work's getting done, that's the #1 priority. So healthcare is always in the top 5. So I've included that so you can take a look and see how you fare against either other districts in your area or as a whole across the state. And then retirement benefits. This one, interestingly, is creeping up and up and up and up on what employees are and candidates are looking for. So that's one you're going to want to take a look at. And that's, I think a lot of us are already in VRS, but things like the 401k, I'm not sure if we really qualify for that one. We might, but 457, I know we definitely do, which is just the public sector version of a 401k. That's a great tool to offer that employees can put in additional money to. And then if you want, at the end of the year, you don't want to increase your fixed hard labor cost, what you could do is offset that bonus into or an increase into that retirement account for them. And then that's something they still own and could carry away with them. And more employees are really looking, especially the two most recent generations to the workforce, are looking to direct their retirement more, looking toward those, how do I save and how do I control how it grows and things, and how does it get invested in those things. You'll see them in commercials too, a lot. They've been promoting that because that's a big trend with retirements. So these are just some of the snapshots that are important for you to give some mindful consideration to. So I just wanted to highlight those for you. And then
Terri, before you leave that slide, I think I know the answer, but can you clarify for some conversation in the chat box what EE stands for?
Oh, EE is employee. I'm sorry. If you see EE all over the place, that's employee. And if you happen to see ER, that's employer. It's just HR shorthand for the last two letters of employee or employer. Sorry about that. I use shorthand a lot and don't think about it. It's what 36 years in an industry does for you. You shorthand everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Then the other thing I wanted to highlight was the things that constantly stay in the top 10 with employees and candidates, and things you really want to sell when you're recruiting, and things you really want to talk about with your employees is important and valuable, is the opportunities for professional development. With the two newest generations into the workforce, that's really important. How do I get my work-life balance with flexibility, time off, and all of that? And then they also want to know, how are you going to grow me? What are you going to do for me? As well as what am I going to do for you? So we do just amazing jobs in that, I think, as far as offerings and participations, and all districts seem to do really well in getting employees out to all these trainings. So that's something that's already at our fingertips to make sure we're maximizing that tool. And then another thing is to make sure that we're providing the tools they need to get the job done efficiently. Employees will leave when it's tough to get the job done, old systems or antiquated processes, things like that. And we do a good job. That's why we wanted to capture the other perks section of that benefits part of the survey. And then the other thing that we hear so much about, not just for employees, but really kind of culturally a shift, is social responsibility, and how do we make a difference in the world, and really sell that with folks, because we're making a huge difference if you think about how, what all of the practices that we promote and all of the education we do, how that impacts, how we care for our earth. That's really a big thing we've got already in our corner. So those are things you can already just look at, tweak, feel great about, and don't forget to sell to employees. Oh, this guy, here's the elephant in the room, and he doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. Wage expectations for fair pay. We're hearing a lot about that. People want transparency, and they want to know that they're being compensated fairly with their counterparts, both with the organization they're at and within their industry. And then we're hearing more and more about living wages and having and earning a living that is really consistent with the current cost of living. So for pay to keep pace with those, with this inflation at 8.6% is really high. And I just read an article earlier this morning where private sectors had been budgeting about 2.9% for an average pay increase. And last year they found their pay increases were 7.7%. So everybody's feeling the pinch. And if you listen to a lot of what's going on at the state level and your locality level, public sector employers are trying to keep pace as best they can, while your private sectors at 7.7% is what it's turned out to be. government's trying to keep pace at about 5%. So we know we lagged simply because of our funding, and we want to be good stewards of money, and we don't, taxation and all of that. So we're still looking at still 5%, which is like a 2% lag, but 2.7, but still everybody's feeling the pinch. So everybody's kind of increasing those budgets. So this is a really great time to be taking the data and really giving it a good look over and seeing how do we want to move forward, either as a whole or individual districts or whatever. And you'll see as we get toward the end of the presentation, before we dive into the actual spreadsheets, that I've given you some things to think about for options to move forward. So I'm all excited. I've designed one system in my head already. I love this stuff. Here goes. Let's see, into the salary data.
This is Shannon. Before we advance, one of the questions is the chat box. Does healthcare include dental and vision as well? That was a separate question on the survey, so I'm not sure if that's going to be addressed later in the slide or.
It won't be later in the slide, but the data is available when you get your spreadsheets. Healthcare, from an employee standpoint, includes medical, dental, and vision. So, but if you're an employer, you're usually looking at those as 3 separate packages. And can you do something with like one of the anthems or Blue Cross Blue Shields, one of the blues, and bundle your vision with your healthcare, and sometimes you can even bundle dental in with that. But from an employer standpoint, you're looking at 3 separate benefits. But from an employee, employees will think of it as just one big healthcare benefit, is pretty much the 2 norms. Is that helpful?
But Cindy, you will see when you get your packet the separation between. But what I did notice in entering all the data is that if health insurance was offered, I think pretty much dental and vision went along with that.
Mm-hmm. And that the reason for that is kind of twofold. A lot of insurance companies have found it's easier just to do bundles because the experience ratings aren't as high. Utilization is experience equals utilization in the HR world. So they don't typically see as much utilization of dental benefits and vision benefits. So they're kind of a low cost roll-in as an incentive for insurers to entice employers to go with their package over someone else. So a lot of times you're seeing that really just rolled together as kind of not really an industry standard, but more of a best practice, I guess. So you'll see that everybody's starting to think of those as all together, hand in hand. Helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Salary data. Oh, but first, there's the really important that I need to share. And it's really important information that we all need to keep in mind as we look at the data and not at titles. Whenever you're doing comparisons for salaries, people love to go to salary.com, which is a self-reported database of salaries. And so there's no guarantee that it's accurate, that so employers really don't use salary.com other than to maybe get an expectation of what their candidates or employees might be seeing. But when you're actually comparing salaries, you need to be thinking about the actual job duties. Am I paying somebody to do A, B, and C, consistent with somebody else doing A, B, and C? You don't want somebody doing A, B, and C compared to somebody doing B, E, and G. So you really need to think about all about the job duties, not the titles. And I used to sing that. I could sing that to that one song. It's all about the bass. You don't want to hear that. So when you're thinking about the data and you're going through the data, some of the numbers might not match your expectations, because what I did is I really went with all of the job duties, whether you said job descriptions or you typed in that box of others. I used all of that data to actually make the matches. So you might not see, all 7 of your conservation texts in the same category. Position data was compiled in a classification based on the duties, and I just can't reiterate that enough. It's all about the duties. If you don't see a position where you thought you would, you're welcome to email me and find out why and where I matched it. And if you look at the very bottom, because I really want to be found, there's my email address. And same way, if you find your position, but it's reported somewhere different than you expected, go ahead and use that email address and I can give you more details around that if you want. But diving right into the data, I've given us this presentation for the PowerPoint. I've just included some key findings, some consistencies in the data, those kinds of things, and some snapshots. Not really anything to get too deeply into the weeds now, because a lot of that's going to come when you get your spreadsheets and the PowerPoint and you start diving into it for yourself. That's where you're really going to have questions, and you'll want to go back and use that little tiny email address that I included. I realize it should have been bigger, but it dawned on me now. For the districts, this was interesting. A lot of the districts are, well, all but one district is 40 hours per week now, which makes it really nice and easy when you're thinking in terms of Fair Labor Standards Act and accurately paying folks, especially your non-exempts. So that's really nice that everybody's adopted the 40-hour work week. Oh, my mouse is sensitive. If you go through and you look at, hang tight, go through and look at the district managers, only 17 districts reported that they already have an established salary range for them. 42 of them are classified as exempt. And that's probably the 42 that already met the district manager job description criteria. However, there were some districts where you have basically kind of your admins or some of your conservation specialists really serving in that dual capacity with district managers. So if it looked like that was the majority of their duties, I went ahead and reported them out in this category. And that's something that, you know, if I did that based on the current duties, that you'll want to think about moving forward, how you want to have some classification, maybe changes, or factor that into your range planning and your compensation. 36 of the positions already allow for flexible schedules, flexible work or flexible scheduling, where you can, you know, work 10 hours today and 6 hours tomorrow. That kind of thing is always the most prevalent, and that was really consistent across all the classifications in this study. It's always the easiest to do for employers to allow that flexible scheduling. You still get your 40 hours. There's no overtime cost associated with it. And the employee gets the flexibility for work-life balance that they need, or even just work balance because they need to be at a meeting late on one night or do something in the community. Then they can juggle the rest of their work hours in that 7-day work week, always within that 7-day work week. Here comes my little FLSA geek out. So always remember to flex that schedule in the same work week. 17 positions reported certification requirements. Conservation planner was the most required. I was surprised by that because of the oversight responsibilities they have. But if you're really working in that more administrative capacity and you've got your expert as boots on the ground, you know, I guess that kind of makes sense. I was just surprised by it, but it probably makes a lot of sense in your world. 33 positions reported requirements to serve on committees. Budget and finance was the most required, followed by personnel. And then they all reported additional primary duties for oversight responsibilities, of course, of the other programs. And we had several, and you can go through the data and look at it. And I've included all of the detail pretty much that I could. So they're going to be long when you print them out, these each page. A lot of them even had dual role responsibilities, like your district manager may also do all of your manage your dams program, or your district manager may also do all your conservation education. So those are things you'll want to consider as you move through looking at the data, and then also when you get to setting ranges and salaries. curiously consistent, and then I'll get into all of this across all classifications. You'll find, and it's going to look confusing, and I think it's just because of the diversity, the such diversity in the way we're structured and the number of staff and the way positions are utilized. I could not find a consistent or specific correlation between length of service and salary. So basically this will be your opportunity, if you guys want to do a nice serious look at your salary data, to figure out how you're positioned within your own office, which I know a lot of offices are really small, but also within your areas, so that you can't poach each other's employees. So that's something really important that you'll want to take and spend some time and set an attentive eye to. I talked about the variations in the scopes of duties and requirements. One of the things that I want to share as an option later would be really supported by what you're seeing at the bottom of the screen. There's really kind of 5 categories of your district managers when you look at the data. You've got your folks like Susie and Loudon, who's administrative. They're not necessarily technical or supervisory, but they're the ones that keep the bus on the road between the lines. They're the ones who make sure statements get done, that meetings happen, notifications happen. They're really the ones that govern your hiring shepherd your hiring processes and things like that. So that's one set. And then you get down to where they need technical duties. They have technical expertise, technical duties. They're still non-supervisory. So you'll see, I don't know why that keeps shifting. Sorry about that. You'll see where personnel committees or district chairs supervise, but then they also have a lot of program oversight duties. And then the next one is where they're supervisory, same role, but supervisory over the staff in the office. And then you'll see duties. These are all in the same categories, which I think would be helpful if we came up with kind of a common definition of what some of these roles are. So there'd be set expectations and people would know, how it's different and why it's different, the salaries and everything, that would help you manage turnover and then also attraction and retention. And then of course, we've got the 4th and the 5th levels of the types of district managers that emerged as clearly different roles in the data that you'll be getting. One thing that we do probably want to do as an overall organization is really define what administrative means as far as these roles go, and then look at kind of those levels. Either it'd be nice if we did it uniformly as a whole and did some of these definitions, and then you guys could build off of those levels, sort of like the state does. That's an easy way to think of it. If you guys kind of wanted to do something like that, then you guys would be able to set up and better price and manage your expectations and your staff, because everybody'd have a clear understanding of why it's different, why one makes this and one makes that, but their roles might be very different, even though we've all got the same title. And titles are really a driver of dissatisfaction emotionally. If somebody thinks they ought to be a senior or a 1, 2, 3 if you start looking at levels, but also passionately about the titles. Well, I'm a district manager and I've got these responsibilities, and this district manager only has those responsibilities. So sometimes just lending titles and levels and clear definitions and expectations is really helpful on lots of more intrinsic and what they call EQ or emotional levels. Let's see, conservation specialist.
I'm sorry, we have a question in the chat box. If pay is bi-weekly, 2 weeks per pay period, with flexible work week, can the 80 hours be anytime during the 14-day work week?
No, always the feds love their 7-day work week. In 1938, they established that rule and they still adhere to it today. You have to define your 7-day work week, and that's typically if you do I mean, there's no really one best week for it, but it has to be those 7 days as you think of them on a calendar week. You have to pick those 7 days and that's your work week. And your 40 hours have to be in that 7-day defined work week. So no, not across the pay period. It's always a 7-day work week. That's one that the feds love to ding employers on because they'll, especially private sector, because they'll think, well, I'm just being flexible, and they're not as attentive to those kinds of things. And that's one that they love to go and make you write big checks for overtime pay for in the private sector.
How about Terry, how about can exempt employees flex over the 2 weeks?
Sure, because exempt, we only care about them getting the job done, and their salary isn't going to change. But non-exempts, their salary could change, and that's why it's such a really big deal to the Department of Labor.
Okay, so to clarify, the 7-day work week applies to non-exempt.
It applies more critically to the
Right.
non-exempt. Mhm.
Okay.
It applies to both, but it's critical to the non-exempt.
Right. Okay. All right. One more question. With
Okay.
option to earn credit hours, does that change the 7-day work week? I guess like comp is what I'm assuming.
Oh, comp time?
Well, it
Well,
says with option to earn credit hours, does
don't-
that change the 7-day work week? But I'm wondering, Charles, are you referring to credit hours as comp time?
I don't know what credit hours are.
That's what I'm wondering if he's referring to.
It's comp time.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
comp time. Thank you.
Yeah, you can, if you earn comp time, first of all, you have to be exempt now under the new Virginia overtime laws. You can't offer comp time to non-exempts anymore. So if you're exempt and you want to earn or use comp time, you can really use that how you want, as long as you get supervisor's approval. If non-exempt shouldn't be earning comp time anymore. It used to be that the federal government allowed, and the federal government does still allow, the state of Virginia doesn't, allow non-exempt employees in lieu of overtime pay to be awarded comp time on an hour-and-a-half basis. So if you work an hour, you got an hour-and-a-half comp time because you had to get the equivalent of your pay. But that ended with the new Virginia overtime law. So comp time for non-exempts, you can earn it over 40 hours in that 7-day work week. That's one of the ways the 7 days comes back into play for an exempt. And then you can also use it after you earn it to, make up that 40 hours within a 7-day work week.
Can you repeat that one more time for everyone? I'm sorry.
Sure. If an exempt employee earns comp time for, like, say they have to work 44 hours in a work week, in the 7-day work week, they would earn 4 hours of comp time. So they would just report that because it's over their 40 hours as comp time earned. And then whenever they want, based on whatever your policy is, some people, like I can carry it with the county for a year, but employers generally like that to be used as soon as possible after it's earned. So they can substitute those 4 hours in one block when they're ready for any of your 40 hours. So you could work 36 and report the 4 hours as comp time, or you could work, leave an hour early on 4 Fridays and report 39 hours worked and 1 hour comp time. You can utilize the comp time in that 7-day work week, and you can also earn it in that 7-day work week. And that's one of the few ways the 7-day work week really impacts exempts.
And what's the name of that law?
Oh, that's just the Fair Labor Standards Act. That still applies to exempt employees.
And when did the Virginia overtime law go into effect?
July 1st was last year, I believe.
Last July 1st.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I talk about these things so long, I forget the effective dates sometimes. Is that
Okay, I think
helpful?
we're good.
Did that helpful? Was his name George? Did that help him?
Charles, yes,
Charles?
I think so.
Okay. Conservation specialist, we just pulled out the same kind of key highlights for you. Of all of the reporting from the data, I found that 68 of the positions reported back through the survey, completed surveys applied to conservation specialist duties. 2 of them have the 37. That's just one district that has the 37.5 hours. And then everybody else is the 40, which we've talked about a little bit. Part-time positions. So we broke it down separately for you guys, and you'll see in the data, how that all is important. Most of them are classified as exempt, 43 out of the 68, so 2 out of 3. And remember, when you're looking at your exempt or non-exempt status, this is a great time to revisit that. And I'll send, if Kendall, if you or Shannon will remind me, I'll send you those tests so you guys can substantiate whether folks are exempt or non-exempt. And I don't use the checklist one simply because it's hard to go back and substantiate if you get challenged on it. I'll send you one that's a little more involved, and you just attach it. You take the job description, you use that and your knowledge of the position, you fill out the FLSA test form that I'll send, and then you decide whether or not it meets one of the tests to be exempt. It has to meet 100% of the tests to be exempt. I can really see where this classification could be either, depending on some of the roles that were mixed and duties that were blended into some of these. But this is also a great time to take those tests and do it by classification and make sure that you've got positions correctly classified as exempt or non-exempt. 53 reported allowing for flexible work schedules. Again, that's a really easy one that pretty much all districts could put into effect with just a policy in your personnel handbook, that you get your 40 hours in within that work week, pre-approved, to flex it, 10 hours on Monday and Tuesday, and then 2 hours less on Thursday and Friday. So that gives employees a lot of flexibility. You still get the job done. Doesn't cost anything because there's no overtime in that 7-day work week. And it's just a kind of a win-win for everybody. So, I mean, I can't promote flexible work schedules really enough, by my opinion. 58 of the 68 had certification requirements. Conservation planner was the most frequently required one. In fact, I think that was maybe all 58. And then EJAA, the Engineering Approval Authority, was the second most required one. So I don't know if there are uniform requirements under contract or under any regulations, but it's a great time to take a look at that and make sure we've got everybody trained and certified the way we need to. This is really going to be a really nice time to think through all your positions and take a look at those things. And then we really engage. One thing that's going to be a really important thing for any candidates is you have to feel going forward is that they feel engaged and valued, and they're able to provide feedback and be heard. People really, that's such a big bonus in the workplace as far as an employee, from an employee perspective. And then it's also a win for employers to hear that diversity of thought, opinion, expertise, those kinds of things. So really the oversight or the requirement to serve on specific committees is a great avenue to take advantage and hear from your employees. So, the more you can require to them to serve and get their input, the more valued and engaged those folks will be, is a norm. I mean, not everybody, you've always got, a grumpy dwarf in the 7 dwarfs bunch, but the majority of your employees really want to be engaged and heard. So that specific requirement, another really nice benefit, doesn't cost you anything, really engages your employees and really gets you more comprehensive feedback and engagement. They all reported additional duties and oversight responsibilities for other programs. So your conservation specialists were really your VAX guys on steroids. They had a lot of things on their plates. So you can go through and look at all of the different duties that are assigned to those guys. And one of the things I noticed with them is that the variations in those duties, not just quantity of duties, but quality of duties also lend themselves to, coming up with like a framework for districts to work from with levels. You could easily have 3, from the data that I've reviewed, 3 non-supervisory levels of conservation specialists and a supervisory level if your district's large enough for that.
Hey, Terry.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, do you mind if we answer a question real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Someone from one of our districts stated that they thought the General Assembly added back the exception for public employers to use comp in lieu of overtime.
I did not hear that went through, but I'll double check.
Okay, if you don't mind.
I know it was proposed a few times, but I don't think it went anywhere.
Okay.
I'll double check. I didn't get a notification from the county attorney's office that it passed, so, but I will double check.
Okay, and someone's just requesting that we keep distinguishing between exempt and non-exempt. I guess when we're talking about these things, whether they're referring to exempt, non-exempt,
Okay.
or comp, overtime, or flex, etc.
For public sector. Okay, I'm writing that down so I can follow up. My hands have really been full with my husband's care lately, so I have not been as on top of that.
That's okay. Someone also just posted that there was a new law to go into effect July 1 of this year, but they're looking for confirmation.
That might be the Virginia Overtime Act.
Okay.
See, we hear so much about these things so long in advance from our legislative liaison. Sometimes I mix up with what the effective date is. So
right.
I'll double check and get that out.
Okay. And then one more question. I'm sorry. Are all reported salaries reported without the value of the benefits?
Correct. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In a salary survey, you can look at total comp, but this one was not designed to do that. This one was designed to allow folks to look at each piece of that package separately. Benefits under one umbrella and salaries under a separate umbrella.
Okay, thanks, Terry.
You're welcome. And really, yeah, that's the way this one was structured. And I didn't take the time to start bleeding those together, largely because the time that takes, because there's so many variations, is ginormous. That's usually why when you see a great big survey from somebody, you'll see it's got like a 6-month delay on it, because it takes time to really dive into the values of all that and come up with the averages and things. One of the things you'll see in the snapshot I've given you guys here, and I did it, I'm sorry, for the district manager too, and forgot to tell you, is here's what we've done is just a snapshot. And you'll find this in the spreadsheets you get. How many for each area were reported, what the average salary was. So if you take the salary of all 11 people, add them up and divide it by 11, it's just your standard, 3rd grade or 4th grade or 5th grade, whatever time we learn averages, it's just that generic average right there. So it's 11 people, take their salary, divide all those salaries by 11, and there's your average. I also gave you the lowest and the highest for each area, and then the length of service for each, the average length of service in that district, in that classification, and then the shortest length of service in that district, in that classification. And I also gave you the longest. So that gives you an idea, especially when you get to, I think it's admin, you'll see these go down, like conservation specialists, you'll see we've got some pretty large numbers over the longest in the area. Some of the admins are pretty short. You'll be, I think on one, it was like a year, 2 years, and 3 years or something. It was crazy, a little bit short. And then the specialist, the part-time, I gave you that data if any of that was reported. And we just gave you the salaries for that, the average salaries for that. Let's see, on to the technician. Now these guys, these numbers are going to look a lot smaller than what was reported. If you look at your, and this is, I'm already leaping to the next slide. If you look at the duties, remember it's all about the duties, all about the duties. A lot of these folks have the same conservation planner requirement and the EJAA requirement. And so, and then they also did more than just VACs. They had septic programs, they had education, they had VCAP. It was really interesting. So you'll be able to see how they really blend it more with that jack of all trades, expertise in one, you know, use that base knowledge to master others kind of category that the conservation specialists are in. So if they had that much going on with those requirements, I tended to move those to conservation specialists, and then that would lend itself again to a couple levels. But those guys are pretty amazing with the duties they do, to be honest with you. If you look at the conservation techs, there's only 2 with an established range. There weren't really very many established pay ranges across all the districts. 12 were classified as non-exempt. Again, it's a great time to take a look at those tests and those update job descriptions and attach it to a FLSA test and make sure that you've got them classified correctly. The ones that I left in here were ones that pretty much had a single program focus, like they were the no-till drill guy, or managed equipment, or they managed the septic program, or they had one focus that was more of a local program, or when they're not VCAP, that was under urban. And then they assisted where needed with other things. So these guys, it kind of makes sense that they're non-exempt, but again, don't just rely on the majority say it's non-exempt. Take a look at your position and your duties and make sure you're square with the Fair Labor Standards Act. Again, this was really great that we had the flexible scheduling for all of those. Can't promote that enough. Conservation planner was the most required. And then again, the EJAA was right behind that. And then they also served on specific committees, had the requirements. Probably just a little more than half of them were on the BMP, the cost share committee for the district. And then all full-time, even these guys reported additional duties, whether it was supporting a grant or assisting with educational duties or assisting with grain barrel workshops, those kinds of things. So no one's really just in a silo wearing one hat and twiddling their thumbs, except a few seasonal workers who come on board for just a short period of time that got shared and reported. Again, these guys, I think, really could be cleaned up into one nice series of levels, because they are wearing multiple hats and they do have the credentialing and things the same. So it might be nice to create one conservation specialist, because we really are specialists if you think about it in what we do with, you know, all of our soil and land management duties, and then just have the levels within. Urban VCAP. This all fits onto one page because there's only 7 dedicated positions for that, for the urban conservation specialist. And most of them were in Northern Virginia, no surprise, highly urban district, and really well-defined. They define their pay ranges, really well-defined duties. So if you have a need to establish that, I would encourage you to reach out for how they're structured, because they did it. I think they did an amazing job. There's my plug for them. And again, here's the data. There were 5 in area 2, 2 in area 3, and then there's the high, lows, and the length of service data. Part-timers, again, were up in Northern Virginia, that district. Go through the same bits of information we pull out as just key highlights. So if you have these, you might want to pay more attention to that, to those little bits of highlights. One pager also for the conservation education specialist. I was actually surprised by this finding. The VCAP I knew was a lot of shared roles, because I tackled the conservation specialist first, because I thought they would be the biggest group, and they were. But they really wear dual hats a lot of the time with VCAP and conservation education. I was surprised how frequently conservation education duties, that full spectrum of duties we had in the survey listed as primary roles. I was surprised how often that was shared with another classification. So that left us with just 11 that were primarily conservation education specialists, and then 8 part-timers. So a total of 19 positions. And then that's the spread across all of the districts. And again, a quick snapshot of where they're at per district for the average, the high, the low, and then the length of service and part-timers. I was surprised we had so many part-timers. 24 seemed to be 24 and 30 seem to be across the board for all of our part-timers, the number of hours needed. And then again, for all of our education specialist positions, we pulled out some of those key findings for you guys to take a look at when you compare against your others. In admin support, this number is a lot smaller than what the actual title lends itself to lead you to think. And that's because really when you looked at some of those duties, what they were doing really lent themselves more to like a district manager light with no supervisory duties or no technical duties. So I rolled them over into that category, and then really would recommend that we come up with some kind of framework for levels of that for them to give them more recognition than some of the folks in these where the duties were consistently assist with service, support to committees, those kinds of things, data entry for different programs, those kinds of things, where it really was clearly you were supporting either the board or the staff, but usually both. So these were truly more support specialists, where the others had a much broader role with oversight, with the preparation for all the documentation for the DCR grant and those kinds of things. So there's not a lot of deviation in the duties. When you dive through these positions, you'll see that there aren't a lot of deviations. Oh, that's an error up there. I double typed 3 in area 3. I'll fix that before it goes out, Kendall. There's not 36 folks at 37.5 hours. That I'll have to fix that error. I see it. That's a good thing we looked at this. Okay, and then I mentioned there were a lot of consistencies in the findings. One of the things while you guys are thinking about how you want to handle your classifications as well as your compensation structures and how you want to position yourself in your local market, either proactively so the great resignation doesn't come knocking on your door, or because you realize that it's been a while since you've taken a look and you just want to make sure that things are competitive and fair and all of that. For whatever your reason is for taking a good serious look at this, while you're doing that, here's a couple of things to keep in mind for what your employees are looking for, in addition to being fairly compensated. And that's really the approach that this particular study took, kind of taking the fairly compensated out of the mix and saying, what are the other things? And it was for 3,100 employers this survey was for. What are the other things that are key and top for your employees that they're looking for? And so it came out, again, you can see the 2 highest was the saving for retirement. So whether you're offering the 457 and then, say your budgets, I know we've got like a really mixed bag of how well-funded or how not well-funded some of the districts are. So if you can really increase those labor costs, maybe you've got some savings you could roll into a 457 plan that would give them a tax savings and all of that, and allow them to save for their retirement without having the expensive VRS if you're not already in it. So that's one thing. And that's really popular because especially with the 2 newest generations, they want to be self-directed in how that money's invested and grows and their approach. So that really gives them a lot of control over it. And if you go with something other than VRS, you're also not you're not permanently increasing your hard labor costs. They're not fixed, where you're going to compound on that increased labor cost year over year. So those are some really good options you can take a look at that are included in the benefits data. The annual sick and holidays, again, you saw that as a snapshot that consistently lands in the top 10. So see how you fare there. And again, I think a really easy way to think about it. I know some of our older generations, like our silent generation especially, they think that they tend to have a perspective a little different about time off. And so if you really think about it, if you're budgeting a $60,000 salary and they're just supplementing annual leave, you're not really paying them more. You're just substituting annual leave and giving them time off, that flexibility, in lieu of that regular $60,000 a year. That's oversimplified, but it's really not costing you anything to have to be generous in these categories, except work productivity. So of course you'll need to make sure that that's all, paramount, top of mind, and before we go approving a whole lot of leave. Greater flexibility in how often they work. We see that in summer schedules, the flexible schedules, the compressed work weeks. Those are all things that are easy to adopt as long as the employees are meeting, the quality, the expectations, deadlines, productivity, those kinds of things. Then it's really one thing that's important to remember is we've already proven that we can be operationally effective while working remotely and while juggling, alternating folks in the office. So that what's called a hybrid schedule. Hybrid is nothing more than work from home and work in the office. It's nothing fancy or elaborate. It just means you're doing a combination of work from home and work in the office. But we've already proven that we can meet all of our operational goals and still be flexible. So let's not have a knee-jerk reaction to back to the office just because we can. Because one of the things that they've been consistently finding in surveys with employers that are really having a lot of turnover issues are that they have been the forced return to office employers, because employees like the flexibility that they have. And so really to be more thoughtful about position, operational need, and then the person, and are they really successful if they can do that. So I've given you some things to think about and criteria that's on the next page. Hold on here. When making the decisions about the workplace flexibility, face time is really, that's something that I alluded to, the silent generation. That's something that's really more important to management than employees. Employees who aren't looking for that upward mobility, they prefer, and they're looking for that hybrid office work from home work arrangement. And that's the most prevalent. Most workers, when you survey the workforce, aren't really looking to be 100% remote. They still want that connection with an office. And I did this amazing, I was on this amazing webinar about 3 weeks ago where it talked about how to really enrich that whole experience and what employees are looking for with their time in the office for it to be relevant and operationally necessary, and to give them opportunities to come back together and say, here's where my project stands, here are the resources I need, here's, really to spend time engaged in those collaborations and conversations. That's what they're finding is relevant and valuable to them. And then what's operationally necessary for an employer to kind of blend those two together. Again, just a reminder that COVID demonstrated that we can we had a very effective continuity of operations while our employees weren't in the workplace. And if you look overall, most employers report that their employees were no less productive on the remote work. So that's why so many employers are going to the hybrid scenario. Evaluate when you're trying to decide how flexible you can be. You can be objective, and it's pretty easy. Evaluate it on a position by position basis. What duties have to be performed in the office to meet your operational needs? If somebody needs to be there to greet customers, then that's not a work from home kind of duty. But if somebody's going to be in the field primarily doing site visits and those kinds of things, and they just need to come in to, do some paperwork, data entry, those kinds of things, that lends itself very much to that hybrid work scenario, which is what they're looking for to maintain. Much less employees reported their stress levels. You hear a lot about stress and mental health with COVID. They were reporting when they have that optimal blend in the hybrid scenario, those stress levels came way down for those folks. And then factor in the employee. Start with your objectively, operationally, and positionally, so you know what your actual needs are, and then you move to the employee in the consideration, and you determine, were they able to maintain productivity? Did they meet all their goals? Can they meet all expected and mandatory deadlines? Because we have a lot of hard deadlines with our grant deliverables. Make sure we're not missing anything, jeopardizing the district in any way. And whether their work product met all the required specifications, quality, quantity, all of that. And then if they're able to do that successfully, that's when you can enter into some kind of hybrid conversation. And, maybe you want to have an agreement around it, just to formalize it for peace of mind for you and the employee. You can do that. Really how you move forward with that is really kind of wide open at this point. But really start with that objective, and then factor in your employee and see where you can go with that, because that's a big one with today's workforce. Another consistency in review in the findings was when you're reviewing the average and the min and max salary data, that's the lowest and the highest. Districts were so operationally diverse in their positions and the program priorities that they have, then they focus on. Like if you look at Northern Virginia, they were fascinating. They're pretty much all VCAP and urban. And I learned a lot from their job descriptions and and I went and visited so many websites. You guys have some really great websites out there. I was so impressed with some of those. And then I really missed the folks on Facebook, because some of them were like 2016 and I wasn't getting good data. And I'm like, I want to know more about you. So that's just my little aside from learning it. I went down a lot of rabbit holes learning about districts. I was very fascinated. Back to this, sorry about that. You're operationally diverse in positions and how you focus and how the work gets done. So that goes back to how things got classified based on duties. So you'll need to just remember to keep coming back to duties. There were a lot of inconsistencies in the position utilization and credential requirements. So like the conservation tech was especially one. Some were being used as conservation specialists. Some were using as largely VAC support, and then they had some other assist duties, and some were like just program duties and really more of a seasonal kind of thing, and with some assist. So the differences in how some of those positions are utilized really made it challenging to account for them within a single classification. That's why when I was going through, I started to recognize there were distinct levels. So it might be really good if we come together as kind of, under the Kindle's umbrella, which, governs a lot of what we do, or assists and supports a lot of what we do. We might want to come together with some uniform specifications and starting points, so that that would make us look a little bit more like the state, but would give a whole lot more consistency to thought within districts and employee minds, and retention, especially things like that. Management structures are operationally diverse and cause numerous variations in positions. Sometimes you don't have anybody supervisory in the office. It's a committee or a board member. Sometimes you've got your district manager managing directly and carrying a workload of other roles or other programs like dam management or conservation education. Sometimes you've got just a handful of districts that actually have district managers and then have first line supervisors. So they've actually taken into consideration the span of control and what's operationally effective to manage a larger organization. So a lot of that diversity impacted how we were able to go forward. And then a lot of it, I know when you're thinking about how to move forward, is going to come down to this last bullet, which are relationships with your the localities you support, including how much or even if you get funding support from them. I know it varies significantly, and that'll impact how you are fiscally able to manage your operations and compensate your staff. And market challenges are likely to make that tougher for some of you folks. So, we're here to help you get creative if you need to make a call, if you're finding you're getting turnover, or what are some alternatives. I've tried to throw out there like the 457, and instead of having your hard costs go up, you could take some of that excess, and DCR can tell you which funds that's all available from. And I know we've got reserve funds for things. We could set up a reserve fund for like annual market managements, get creative with some of that. So there's ways to be creative, and we can help you think through those. And it might be easier for some. Like Loudoun gets amazing support, I know, from the county. So I just, for the offhand, I would think it would be easy for them. And I know it was just recently easy for us to do a deep local dive and make some adjustments on their established ranges, and then make adjustments for market. Let's see what's next. What you need to think about before you get into the data. There are options for you guys to establish competitive ranges, or even, and I really like this one, just to be honest. I'll throw it out there. It's my favorite. Establish a hybrid statewide soil and water district compensation structure, something that defines your levels, and then you guys can build off of those for your district specifics. And then it also would give you a framework of salary ranges that's pretty wide, so that and bands, so that you could go up level. You could do it in grades or bands. They're basically the same thing, grades and bands. One's just, grades are more transparent than bands. They're easier for employees to understand. There's a lot of pros to having a statewide framework, and that would be really expectations around employees, and not just jumping for money and then finding out the role's different, because we've also had a few districts where staff has jumped and then they've said, oh, I want to come back because the roles were different, and that's why the pay was different. So there's lots to think about with this one, but I think these are follow-up conversations as you dive into your data and see how you might want to go forward. You can do the local market approach. This one has a lot of pros because it's very competitive within your specific target market. I just did one of those for Mountain, and hopefully that was very helpful for them. Back one bullet. The statewide one, I think if you went with something like that, I think you might want to overlay something like I think something a little more structured than the FP. I don't know. Are you guys SW for Virginia, VDHRM? You'll hear me say that a lot. That shorthand is Virginia Department of Human Resources. They have what's called statewide pay, and you'll see it listed as SY in the survey data that you'll get, or SW, I mean, statewide. And then you'll see FP, which is fair pay. And that's where they've added 15%. If it's still 15%, I didn't get a validation on that, because then I found out the reason why there was some turnover at the state. But fair pay just makes a market adjustment for cost of living in an area. So you'll see FP in there, and that used to be 15%. So I don't know if it still is, but I assumed that it was in our thing. But the really cool thing is if you did something like set up your own state classifications and levels, you could also use the NRCS. They've already done all the work for us for any locality cost of living. You could just layer that on top of it then. So if you're the Tidewater area, they've already figured out a cost of living adjustment. If you're Richmond, or if you're Northern Virginia, they have, and then the rest of Virginia. And I've included that data in the survey data that you'll get pages and pages of it. It's so exciting. So that was one thing that I thought was really exciting about back to bullet one. Back to bullet two is you could do a local market approach. And the pro is that the work, as far as being competitive within your market as a public sector employer, the work is already done. So your localities have already put the legwork into figuring out where the market is and how they're going to either lead or par or lag the market. And if you're going to lead, obviously you're going to pay at market or better. if you're going to par the market, then you're going to try to pay as competitively and close to the market ranges and midpoints as possible. And if you're going to lag, which most public sector employees lag, remember, private sector was found they were doing 7.7% increases, and governments are doing 5%. So that's called a lag, that difference between the market and what a public sector employer can do. So if you want to lag by 2% or whatever, still get you competitive talent because you've got other things to sell, like your professional growth, you've got great benefits, you've got the flexible workplace, you've got a lot of those other things that you can sell and market. That's a great lag position for you. It's even better for par or lead, but it's still a great position for lag to sell all those other things. So you can set your market position to match your needs, which would really be funding needs and operational needs. And to do that, you build your own deep dive, and you pull data from the surrounding localities to build more exact market ranges from exactly where you're going to be pulling your employees from. I doubt many of us are going to have employees drive an hour to work. So it really lets you target right into where you're going to be pulling your talent from. It takes about a day to do a deeper locality specific dive for our smaller districts, say 1 to 4 positions, like I did for Mountain. Actually took me 2 days because I did it over 2 days. But if you look at all the work that went in, it's about 8 hours worth of work to go to each website and to go to match the duties for duties. And it gets a little trickier because you aren't going to have title matches necessarily to guide you. You have to look for things that are like environmental or anything like that. And then you go into the duties and you look for things like manages stormwater runoff. And if that's what your position does, okay, this might be a good match. And you go through and you look at the data like that. The admin support and the district managers are always going to be the easiest. The conservation specialists are getting easier because there's so many, like the MS4 and all the stormwater runoff and stuff like that. They're creating more environmental positions in local governments. And so you're going to have more and more matches where you can match those duties. So it's getting easier to do with the local approach. You could take the VDR HM approach and just adopt what they've already built. It's already built. People are familiar with it. If they make arrangements based on what the General Assembly does, then your district pay keeps pace with that. So it's just an easy to adopt structure. And you'll see in the actual spreadsheets when we get to them that we've already done a duties to duties match. And so you'll know which classifications through the occupational family and all of that will be a match for each of the classifications in your district. So in what we've looked at, the classifications we've looked at, you can adopt it of a partner agency. In RCS Virginia scales, for example, it's floating around somewhere. So is the DCR PowerPoint, which will show you how DCR looked at the Virginia scales and all of their positions and did a really nice PowerPoint presenting on how they fit into that structure. So those are 2 really great ways you can just kind of adopt what they've done and then just follow their lead because they're doing all the legwork for you. Build a model based on this survey's comparator data. That's a really good one that goes back kind of, it's a similar model to the local market approach. You can basically, when you get to the data that you'll see in the spreadsheets, I've pulled the Bureau of Labor and Statistics data. So that's the data that the feds pull from all mandatory benchmark employers. And so what they do is the Bureau of Labor and Statistics identifies employers in different segments in the different sectors. It's what it is, sectors. And those have to report either monthly or quarterly their number of employees, the classifications in their employees, which you have to have your structure, your classification code structured to match them, which I maintain that for the county. And then they can use that data to plug right into what they call their codes, their standard occupation classifications. you can find those on ONET and match them right up. And then, so BLS, you'll find where I already did all that match work for you, whether you're in a metropolitan data. So they have it for the BLS. Once they compile that from all these thousands of employers, they report it out in metropolitan statistical areas, which is MSAs, you'll see. And so if you're in Northern Virginia, they have the MSA, Tidewater has an MSA, Richmond has an MSA, but if you're in Southwest Virginia, they also compile it for non-metropolitan statistical areas, and they have those regionally set for different employers. So I've included both, whatever's applicable to your area for that, so you can get that's real employer data reported to the feds either monthly or quarterly. I also included all the VDHRM data for statewide and fair pay. And then I also included, if you've been able to see the DCR PowerPoint that's floating around, I've taken their PowerPoint and gone back, what do they call it? Reverse engineer. I reverse engineered it into the VDHRM data, and then theirs to match to ours as close as possible. And then the NRCS data, because I know that was something that was floating around. I went to their site, the NRCS site, and went through all of their classifications and made the matches so that we would have just what's applicable to us. All of that's detailed in footnotes so that you can see what the duty matches were when you get to the spreadsheet. And again, it's all based on the job duties, because that's what you need to match on to in order to pay somebody who does A, B, and C fairly or competitively with somebody else doing A, B, C. And the pros to each of these, I've just shared like the biggest pro. You can set your own market position, par, lead, to match your budget or needs, or even lag and then promote all of the other great things you bring to the table. Let's see. And then, of course, after you do these things, then it'll be setting pay ranges and criteria for placement, making adjustments to existing employees' pay. And I sent out, I'll have to get it back. I think I sent it to maybe Dawn Wells. I sent a really great just layout for how to do that, in case you wanted to do it. I'll track down that email and get it into something shareable for everybody to take a look at, because I'm sure you don't want to just talk to me all the time. And then one thing I noticed when I was going through the salaries is, don't forget to consider changes to the minimum wage and the upcoming changes, as well as some living wage considerations for like the cost of living in your area, as well as the CIP now and inflation that's at 8.6. So because you don't want to be losing people to others who can pay more, because they've probably got their heart in this job. Let's see what's the best we can do. But minimum wage, I noticed some of the salaries, when you factor those full-time salaries out, you divide them by 2080, we're coming out pretty close to this $12 to $12 an hour. So or sometimes less. So you want to make sure that you're aware of the minimum wage and how that's going to impact your workforce. Pros and cons, again, to adopting any model. This is just so that you have them there when you go back and you're working through the actual data. You can have this PowerPoint and think about, what benefits do you bring to the table that's going to help you decide on lead, par, lag, cost, what's cost effective, what can your budget support for adjusting salaries for new hires as well as existing employee pay, because you don't want to create a whole lot of compression where you've got folks with lesser experience being paid the same as somebody who's done a phenomenal job for you for 15, 20 years. And then what's competitive again for the market, what's your workplace like, because people will leave workplaces and managers faster than they'll leave pay. So think about, and that's one thing that employees, this was really fascinating in the webinar I told you I did a couple weeks ago. One thing that employees are leaving, they used to quit workplaces and managers. Now they're quitting toxic coworkers. So if you need to really think about, You know, it's like, I do not need to deal with Bob anymore. Bob makes me crazy and I can go over here and make the same or do whatever. They'll leave because Bob makes them crazy now, which is really a fascinating find that's starting to trend. So take a look at and manage your toxic employees. Now's a great time to find other people looking. Trust versus micromanagement makes people crazy. Trust them to do their job, figure out ways to build that trust. If you're a micromanager, that's got to be hard. Never been a micromanager. I was micromanaged once and I actually left. Make sure it's a cohesive and collaborative, but that seems to be a pretty normal standard dynamic with us. Respect, appreciation. These are the other things, you know, that you can really sell in your workplace. And some of you guys did that. I forget whose class specs sell it right up in their class spec and their job postings. So those are things that are really important not to lose sight of. When you go through the data, you'll see some districts can make adjustments to be closer to market. Some need to be making bigger adjustments to get closer to market. Nothing unusual when you're looking at basically multiple employers, which is what we are. Some districts appear to already be market conscious. Salaries already aren't too far off, or they've been already making incremental changes to do this. And that's another thing. You can think about how to stage your implementation so that it's not necessarily a big bang, or you can just do a big bang and implement it all at once. You know, figure out what works best for your districts. These are all important comps for you guys, I think, to not lose sight of. They're just the ones I just went through. And then pay exists. You can't really change your range and your new hires without considering your existing staff, or you're going to create real morale issues over the compression in the pay. So when you're considering pay adjustments for existing staff, here I've just listed out several key things that we keep in mind when we're doing that. The length of service with your district. And the reason you want to consider it with your district is because when you hired the person, you've already given an adjustment consideration at that time of hire for their prior length of service. So when you're doing the adjustments going forward, you're considering for what's the service been for your district. If the position serves in a dual capacity, that's always a tough one to apply evaluation to. A good baseline best practice is you can base it either on the primary role or the percentage of time. And then the primary role ideally is the higher paid role. And if not, you need to really look at how you want to align those duties or come up with some sort of hybrid for that. Oh, hold on. The credentials required for the positions. And if you take into account for that, like, I know one of the things we're doing a lot with the county is we're trying to promote credentialing, and we're doing that through what's called career development, so that they can also then assume more duties. And in several of our departments, we've actually been able to reduce staffing or shift staffing, because as we grow those people and they get those credentials, they can handle, you know, a full range of responsibilities instead of just a piece of a project like erosion and sedimentation, then we'd have somebody else do another part of the inspection. So as we increase all those certifications and those capabilities, get them the experience, we've been able to reduce and shift staff. I don't think you guys can reduce. We're already pretty small and pretty lean, but that's just part of the value in that, those credentials, and then the amount of experience that, so you want to apply a value to what they bring to the table. And then whether or not it's supervisory, a best management practice, because we use that same term in HR, is generally you want a minimum of 10, but at least a 15% spread between the staff level range and the supervisory range. And then pretty much, let's explore the data and what you'll receive. Now we're gonna, with the data that we got back in the Excel spreadsheet, people didn't all have the same version or a compatible version, or maybe they went to Google Docs. So we got kind of all kinds of things back. And so what I thought we would do to send the data out is we would just print it all to PDF so that you can actually see, read, print, whatever. And then if you want Excel, you can just request it and we'll send you the Excel spreadsheet. Because me, I like to put my fingers in a spreadsheet, but we'll send it PDF so that we know everybody can open it. When you get the PDF or the spreadsheet, you'll notice there are different tabs for each one, for each of the classifications that we looked at. We requested data on and did the analysis for. All the data for that classification is located on that data's classification tab. They're all going to be set up to print landscape on 8.5 by 11, but you can of course change that if you want. The top section is district data and aggregate by area. And so what that means is we looked at, that's where we looked at things like the credentials, length of service, the flexibility options, serve on a committee. Here's what the common duties are, what we found to be common duties when you start to look across all of them, and some of the ancillary duties that popped up, even if it was just like a one-off, we tried to include it. So that's what you're going to see in the top half of the each spreadsheet that you get. And the bottom section is going to be all the district and comparator data. And that's where we took the data from you and we listed it in the percentiles here. Oh, here you see it. There's a picture. Never mind. You'll see it for we basically took your data and structured it like you'll see it from like the BLS, from VDHRM and all of those. And then at the very bottom are the averages for full-time, part-time, length of service range, and then the mid is your average, and then your min and your max, it's your high and low salaries. And so, got any questions in the chat room, or should I go to this next screen?
I think you have a few questions, but I think they're okay to hold until you finish your sharing of the data, and then we can open it up.
Okay. Let me get to that one. Okay, without further ado, here's the data. This is, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is the spreadsheet, and you'll just see it in PDF version, but you'll see here are the tabs I just told you about, one for each of the classifications. And then here is, we'll start at the top of this one. Let me scroll up. Here are the duties, just so that you remind us, or there's a reminder of what we were looking at when we were making matches, because that's always got to be kind of front and center when you're doing analysis and comparison. So I kept those duties there with us just to remind us of that. And then let me see if I can figure out how to scroll this without. Okay, here's where we get into the nuts and bolts of what you guys filled in. And we go into how the data responded for each classification in each area. And these are just in aggregate. So there's 47 districts. We had 6 respondents in area 1, 6 in area 2, 8, 11. These are just how many districts are in each area. And so then you can see in the next row how many full-time positions were reported in each area. And then you can, just so you have that against it. So you could see, like, if we have more than one position for each one, you'd pick that up there. Go full-time, part-time, FLSA designation, just so you can say, oh, mine's exempt, the majority are exempt. I think I'm pretty good. I haven't updated it. There haven't been any changes, or I'm non-exempt and the majority are exempt. And so you could take a look at that. And again, that's something you really should do. Update a job description annually, even if it's just review it and sign off, no changes. And then if there's no changes, you wouldn't need to do your FLSA again. But whenever you do make changes to a job description and add or subtract duties or change roles in some way, you want to go back and redo an FLSA test, because they're going to pull and want to know currently. They don't care what you did 5 years ago and it said this. What's the guy doing now, and what's the current match to the test? So it's always good to do those kind of frequently. Here's where we got into the flexible work arrangements, because those have really bounced to the top with employees and candidates. Certifications, we've got a section on that, and this is where you can dive into deeper dive on who requires what, which ones. specific committees. This is a really good way to engage employees in their expertise, the diversity of thought and all of that, and really get them engaged, more engaged really, with committees. And then here's the common responsibilities. The FOIA officer, these were the ones that, in addition to what was at the top, these are the ones that we found our district managers doing. So we added those in there for you to check out. And you'll see that this list gets much more diverse when you go through each of the tabs. So that's actually exciting. And then we get down to the nuts and bolts of salary data. Here's where you look at area 1. So we had 6 positions reported. The lowest position salary reported, so no one makes less than that. Your 10th percentile is this salary amount. Then you got your highest. Your mean, these are 2 very important numbers, mean and median, but they're also going to be different numbers, because mean is just your true, 5th grade learned how to do averages kind of number. Take all the salaries, add them together, divide them by the number of salaries. The median, when you're looking at percentiles or quartiles, pretty much the same thing, small distinctions. This is where the percentiles become pretty important when you're looking at market ranges. And median means that should be your market midpoint, where half of the people in that field earn less and half the people in that field earn more. And that's generally driven by things like experience, credentialing, could be hot market drives it in addition to those 2 things. But generally, it's where you're going to fall in a percentile is going to be generally driven by where you're at in your career, length of or your experience and your credentialing, and then the depth and breadth of duties. So as those duties, spread and get more diverse, you might want to, this is where your banding would come into play within quartiles, or your grades within quartiles. And then 25th, again, 1/4 of the respondents make less than this amount. 1/4 make more than 75%, and then your 2 midpoints. And then we've got your BLS data based on local government. So what they break it down into all those different sectors, private, public, and all of that, nonprofit. I went with all of the data for local government. Here's where you'll see your metropolitan statistical areas. They even get into kind of small areas for some of them, but I included those for each of the areas, and you'll see those listed separately. And then you get into some of your bigger markets. What you'll find is the number reported of positions reported in their data and our data. And then I went across and picked up all their values for the same percentiles, so that we're looking apples to apples, as well as duties. Duties are apples to apples. We've got apples to apples in how we're looking at the ranges and the salaries. Go down, here's the DCR PowerPoint. I backed that into to matched it through the occupational family grouping and all of those things through VDHRM. This one happened to come out to pay band 4. And so included that off of that. That was just a PowerPoint single slide. Then here's the VDHRM data, SW statewide, FP fair pay, because this happens to include Northern Virginia. And then I went through the NRCS, and you'll find that they have developed, I forget what they call their sheet. Anyway, it's the differential per region. So I used their scales. And in this case, I gave them the rest of Virginia values, and then also their DC values for their pay values, because they apply a percentage to different areas of the state based on cost of living expenses. And you'll see we did that for every single area in each classification. And then so that you have confidence in how these were matched, or you can have confidence. Again, there's just the stuff that I pulled out as just a a screenshot, quick one. Go down, here's all of the little footnotes that apply. So you'll see like 8 and 5 and all the different footnotes. It'll tell you for in the metropolitan statistical area wages, here's all of the data that we took and we aged it and did what we needed to do. Matched it to these job duties in these standard occupational classifications in the DCR PowerPoint. This one I linked to environmental manager. This, and then you go down for VDHRM, you go through their data that's available online. I even gave you the links if you want to match it and see if you wanted something different. Same way for NRCS, I went through all of their data, gave you the links back to the data. And then here's footnotes for that go along with some of the districts. So this, I started, you'll see these are handled 2 different ways. One, it's with the footnotes. And so I thought this was great because it didn't really clutter the screen up top. And then the more I got to thinking about the diversity and got deeper into the data, I decided that putting it down here wasn't really as reflective of the diversity and position and some of the considerations you needed to make. So you'll find when you go to the next one, like conservation specialist, all the results are structured the same way. But what I've done, instead of putting it in footnotes, I've gone ahead and included it right in the spreadsheet. So you can be aware of if there's additional requirements. Oh, here's what in area 1, here's what these guys require, or someone in these do. And you generally know each other well enough to know which one's which. So I didn't clutter it with more than I needed to, I don't think. But I think just enough to make good decisions. Same way with committees. Or at least I know I could make them as a comp professional based on these notes. And I can help you do that too if you want. And then here are all of the specific programs that are in addition to whatever else this person does and what's noted up here. So out of looking at the conservation specialist, there were 71 positions with common duties. And this is how they broke across there. They provide technical assistance to these guys. Here's all the duties that were consistent across the classification. And you can see how many, you know, we tried to include everything. I don't know why I included Koya on that. I thought one had it, but anyway. And then down here is where you really find the diversity. So I wanted it grouped right with the duties because I felt that ended up being more valuable. And then same again, you've got all of the objective data because it all comes direct from employers right here for each of the areas. And you just look at each tab. And this is why probably questions today will be more vague, but once you guys dive into this, we definitely you'll probably have questions, and the water cooler will be really rich discussions, I think. And we did that for each one. I think that's pretty much all I can tell you. What else you got for me?
Folks, we have about 20 minutes left if you want to come off mute, or if there's some questions we missed in the chat box that you'd like to bring back up for Terri.
Or we can hang up and send it to you, whatever you want to do.
To Megan's question, when can we expect to receive a copy of this PowerPoint and supporting information spreadsheets? So you are going to get the Excel spreadsheet and PDF form to view, as well as her presentation PowerPoint, as well as a recording of the video. So we need to take a few minutes after this. It will take a little bit of time to actually download the recording and for us to get it posted to YouTube.
And I need to make a 1 typo correction, don't forget.
That's right. Okay, so we'll touch base with Terri afterwards to fix that 1 correction in the PowerPoint.
Probably tomorrow.
I looked right at Shannon. She knows.
Worst case scenario tomorrow.
Worst case scenario tomorrow. And anybody who has registered for the meeting, not just participated, will be getting copies of it. And again,
Terri, I'm sorry, this is Kathleen. I just had one question for area 6. It's showing the data for 5 districts. All of our districts participated. Did we ever get Peanuts data in here, Peanut Soil and Water District?
We did, and I had trouble finding the email. I have no idea why I have trouble getting their emails, and I had not added it to that district or to that data, so I can do that.
Okay, yeah,
I
because
did
it kind
find-
of showed our data off a little bit.
Off by one, yeah.
Because she has, I think,
I think,
it's 3 full-time and a part-time.
yeah,
So
I
that's
saw
kind of a
3.
lot of data.
Yeah.
So
I
hopefully
gotta
we'll get
get
that
that
before you
added.
send it out.
Yeah, I can do that beforehand when I make the correction if you want. I
Okay.
was just going to add it and then send it to area 6 with the
That'd
correct.
be wonderful.
But if
Yeah,
we
that'd be
want
great too, Terri.
but if we want to send it tomorrow, then I can just go ahead and add Peanut tonight. Is that you just want to say tomorrow, Kendall?
Yeah, I will.
tomorrow.
I'm going to work on it tomorrow. So it'll
Okay.
be, it will definitely be tomorrow. So if you just
Okay,
want to.
then I'll just go ahead and
tomorrow
add
morning.
Peanut tonight.
Okay. Thank you so much, Terri. Great
Yeah,
job.
you're welcome. I did finally track down their email. Kendall forwarded, I think on Friday or maybe whenever we talked. And I just didn't have time to get those added in. So what I thought I'd do is just amend it and then resend it to 6 since it really only affected the one area.
Sure.
But everybody
Yeah.
else's data is all in there.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
It's a
we have
wonderful.
I see Tara commenting in the chat box. We have the data. I'm so sorry, Tara.
Sorry,
You know,
Tara.
Right, some reason your emails don't actually make it to Terry, so we found it in my inbox and forwarded it to her to capture it when we talked last Friday.
Tara, that's totally on my side of the house because one of my assistant directors at the county, when they email me, I think from I don't know if it's their tablet or their phone, it goes into my other folder or my junk folder, and he's an assistant director with the county through the county email. And so yours was getting trapped, I think, the same way. Our security guy, his name is Warren, and he retired from the Pentagon, and I swear he thinks he still works there. It's crazy.
Well, I know I sent that because there was issue. Y'all said y'all didn't receive it. I sent
Yeah.
it twice, and so I just didn't want it to look like the Peanut District wasn't on board filling out that survey, but I did send it, and it's been plenty of time that I sent that.
Yeah,
So,
that's totally on our side, my side of the house. And Kendall was able to get it through hers and send it to me. And I'm just gonna add it and then amend it. But since we're gonna do it tomorrow, I'll just add you in tonight. But we've been
Okay.
counting it as 100% because we knew we had you.
right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's perfect. Thank you guys for being patient. I think that makes sense for us to make sure we get Peanut included. We
Okay,
get that revision on the PowerPoint. We make sure the recording is uploaded, and Shannon will email everyone tomorrow, as well as the save the date with the Zoom link for July 14th. Thank you. We'll still stay on the line. We blocked till 3. Anybody else want to come off and ask some initial questions?
Hey, all, this is Ann. Can you hear me from TJ?
uh-huh.
Hey, I put a question in the chat box, and I think you and I have spoken about disability before. I think one thing to consider when people are looking at who has VRS and who doesn't, and those districts that are thinking of going forward with VRS, it might be helpful at some point to either have someone from VRS come and describe. I know each district can do it individually, but as a group, it might be nice to have them as a guest speaker. And just talk about how there are differences for disability within, depending on what level of plan someone is in. So that if they're a hybrid, they have different disability benefits than they do if they're a plan 2 or plan 1. And I don't, so there's an assumption probably that VRS is equal. You either are in it or you're out, but even within it, there's a lot of variation. And sometimes that might not be clear when people are picking and choosing
That's
whether they want to.
because there's 3 actually. There's plan 1, plan 2, and hybrid, and they each have variations in their benefits. Yeah.
I mean, not, yeah. So if you're already, if you're using VRS, you probably already know what they are. But if there are districts that are on the fence about going that direction, it would be good for them to know that it's not all necessarily created equal.
Yeah.
And I would,
Um,
great to have a bigger discussion on disability also, just as far as like, districts in general. And this gets to that question I asked also about HR. And someone asked earlier about financial. We look at those administrative roles, Terry, and I think you had a great idea of like coming up with several different categories. And one of them is like administrative, but probably heavy on the financial side, more
Yeah.
than just maybe bookkeeping. And then administrative, but heavy on the HR side, or our district manager, is there kind of a combination of who's playing that role? And are there some trainings that anybody who's in that role should go to? And you may have that in that spreadsheet, but it's, tricky when you've got, sounds like some district managers that are certified conservation planners, and then they also need to be HR experts, which is a field, right, Terry? It's an entire career.
Yep.
And then there's people who are obviously really heavily on, the financial side, and maybe a CPA or may have more financial background. And so there's such a wide range of expertise, to think that, one person is always going to be able to do. That would be like saying, Terry, could you go out and do conservation planning and do the bookkeeping and the HR, so.
Yeah.
oh,
And two districts had distinct financial officers to serve in those capacities, which I left in the admin support category because they were unique to just that was the full scope of their roles was financial. But you're right. I think that levels would be, if there could be some uniformity maybe in that and expectations and build around that, that would be helpful for districts.
And I wanted to jump in for Ann as far as with VRS. If your district, because my district is in the middle of in trying to see if we're going to get in VRS, and we're doing the different studies. So once your district makes a decision that they may want to get in to VRS, the VRS staff will, I've had many phone calls with them, Zoom meetings, where they will discuss the different plans that your district can get in. So I think if they are trying to do that, the initial phone call, if you make it, is free, no cost, before they do any kind of study, and that will be good if you're looking to do that. And
we've had VRS as far as long as I think our district, as long as it's been around that I know of. But I was thinking in terms of, when you're looking at the spreadsheet and you're like either VRS or you have a 401, it's not it's not all created equal. So we do, and you're right. They do provide, they do have people who will answer questions, but just making sure that anybody who's not in it and thinking about going into it, disability is a good example. The disability levels are very different in hybrid than they are in the Plan 1 and Plan 2. So each employee is not getting the same level of benefit.
Yeah, and they break that down for you as well when they give you that information to help you or help the district make that decision. And there's some things I know with us with VRS, because our district has never been in it, things that we didn't know as far as if my district decides to go in, I've been here 24 years and I say, hey, I don't want to go in. Because our district has never been in VRS, I can do that. I can opt out. Now, once my district, if they decide to go in and they go forward, every other employee wouldn't have that opportunity to opt out. That's what the district does.
It's
some good information, that I never heard of in the disability portion that she's talking about, as well as something I brought to my board as far as getting into VRS, because it's not just retirement. They do have, disability and these other things in the plan. That's really good. So.
Right. And maybe a fall session could be on disability, and then have someone come and speak about from VRS specifically on their programs. So, Yeah.
And we have disability too. We're not in VRS yet, but on our own, the district, our district offers our employees disability under our health insurance as a separate plan. So that's something other districts may be doing as well.
That would be great information to share.
And then also the retirement benefit for the new plans are all defined contribution, not defined benefit. So if you want to move your district in thinking you get the formula that you were used to, it's not that way anymore. VRS for the hybrid now is really more like a 401k than what you were used to for a defined benefit. Take your 3 highest years, average them over your actuarial lifespan, and that's going to be your amount per month. That's not the way it's calculated anymore. It's really VRS with the hybrid. If you move toward that now, is really more of a 457 or 401k just through the state plan.
Right. Yep. And those are also big differences too. So
big differences. Oh yeah, big differences. It really depends on the market and your investment strategy, how much your retirement would be with the new VRS hybrid versus you work and you get your retirement benefit is based on your work wages. That's totally
correct. And
different.
yeah.
Totally
Yeah.
different formula from
Yeah, and I
defined
think
benefit to contribution. Yeah.
right. And I think there've been assumptions of like, oh, if you're on VRS, this is how your life will end up when you retire. And nowadays it's like, whoa, not anymore.
Yeah.
It's different. So
Yeah, and they're only
Terri.
offering the hybrid plans,
Now.
I think, for districts now entering in. So that is a huge difference and a big decision that employees, especially employees that have been around for a long time, whether we want to jump on, or stay with our 401k that we've had. So
right. Well,
it
and
is
Kathleen, for the employee too. So if a district like us has been in VRS, but any brand new employees automatically are hybrid, they're not eligible for Plan 1 or Plan 2, even if the district originally joined during the Plan 1 year era.
Correct.
okay. I didn't realize
Employees
that.
can only go into hybrid as of, I think,
Correct.
like 2012, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, there is no option for Plan 1 or Plan 2 anymore.
Yeah, unless you're transferring from another government state, Virginia state. So if someone worked for
Yeah.
DCR and they had been a DCR for 30 years and they were a Plan 1 and they decided to work for TJ, then they would stay as a Plan 1. But if it's a new employee who has not been enrolled in VRS, that they came from another state or nonprofit or something, for instance, they would only be able to pick hybrid.
Correct.
But again, I think, yeah.
Recommendations on like reclassifying someone from an admin position to something like I was actually reclassified about a year and a half after I started from admin and financial to just financial specialist. But I know there's not really that kind of category by itself out there, like y'all were saying earlier.
Yeah, I think there's only 2 of you.
Gotcha.
It's like our soil scientists. There's only 2 of them.
Oh, okay. Because I know some of my counterparts are pretty much more in my role and not strictly just an admin role.
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
going in, trying to transfer or whatever the word is, to move into like the titling changing to more match what they're doing, I think is what I'm trying to ask. Do you have any recommendations or
For reclassifications?
Yeah.
That would start with, you'd want to have current job descriptions, come up with a title that's reflective, and then go through the data and figure out where you want to fit in, or if you want to come up with like a local model and develop a range on that. And then when you place employees, that's what the email I'll look for. I got to write that down too, on how to make those adjustments. I did a summary for, I think Hanover, Caroline, maybe. I did a summary for one of the districts that were thinking about that. And I'll have to find that email and I'll put it in a Word doc for you guys to have as kind of a general guideline.
Okay, thanks.
All good conversation. We've got a couple more minutes. We'll stay on the line, but again, tomorrow, Shannon will be sending out some of the details and save July 14th. We will not have a formal agenda. We're just going to open the Zoom and let folks talk about questions they might have or issues and concerns and understanding the data a bit more now that you've been able to get the materials and dive in and really talk about what those next steps are so we can use it. Really glad it is timely. Thank you, Heather.
Well, I'm gonna log off and get busy.
I think so too. This is
I'm so
your last chance
excited.
if you have questions for Terri right now.
Terri, I just wanted to say thank you again, because this is an amazing job and a huge amount of work. And I know this is really going to be a great resource for districts moving forward. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Terri.
You're
I
welcome.
will be on
Bye.
the lookout for the edited documents so Shannon can get them out tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll send the edited one, the corrected one, and I peanut. And then I'm also gonna look for 2 other documents or 3, FLSA. I'm gonna put all this stuff in an email. I've got a list.
Or do you just want me to send the benefits data from what I have, or are you gonna, I don't know if you've made any changes to that?
I haven't made any changes to the data. That was a pretty straightforward compilation, so I think you should be okay
Okay,
to use that.
Mhm.
Just make
Yes.
sure everybody's in there.
okay, yep.
Terri, are you gonna send out the PowerPoint as well?
Mhm.
Okay, because that
Yeah,
was
I gotta
awesome
correct
too.
that typo in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. I think my board would kind of look at a PowerPoint a little more than this. Like I might have the area 6, but I think the PowerPoint was really nice.
Okay.
Especially at the end of kind of some of the benefits for the employers as well, to kind of maintain our employees. It was really good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, you'll get all that. Spreadsheets and PowerPoint.
All right, guys.
Oh, my landscaping crew's here. Can you hear them? I'll turn off so we don't. Sorry. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
We'll see you on the
Terri.
14th.
Welcome.
All right.